Hello, everybody. It is Thursday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, assistant sports editor for multimedia at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, joined for our weekly Zeise's Right video by Post-Gazette sports columnist Paul Zeise. Paul, we got a lot to talk about this week. Obviously, we'll get into a little quarterback talk with the Steelers, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields. But we've done a lot of other videos leading with that topic. So we're gonna start off talking about the receivers. It's a favorite pet topic of mine and Paul's on this show. So we're going to talk about them. Do the Steelers have enough? What should we make of basically everyone not named George Pickens adding up to 2 catches for 8 yards in the opener against Atlanta? Obviously, big news this week is the Backyard Brawl. So we're going to be talking about Pitt versus West Virginia at Acrisure Stadium on Saturday, reacting a little bit to Penn State's ugly win against Bowling Green, and then wrapping up by talking about Ben Cherington, Pirates GM, saying that manager Derek Shelton expects Derek Shelton to be back next season amid all of the speculation about whether either one of them will be around next season. So, Paul, excited to get into it. Just before we do, we just want to thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's Pella Windows and Doors of Pittsburgh. There's no better place to get new windows and doors installed in your home than Pella, who can help you save on energy costs year-round. Schedule a free in-home consultation with your local Pella Windows and Doors to find the right product for your home and budget. Give them a call at 866-593-1560 to discuss your project further. That's 866-593-1560 to get started planning on your new windows and doors installation with Pella Windows and Doors of Pittsburgh. Paul, I guess I'll broach the question this way about the receivers. How alarmed should we be on like a scale of 1 to 10? Because I look at a stat line and I see Van Jefferson and Calvin Austin coming up with 2 catches and that being about the extent of it beyond George Pickens and say that's pretty bad. But I've heard people, also make the argument. I think Ray Fittipaldo notably said, listen, Calvin Austin did not play snaps that suggested he's going to be a big part of this offense. And you could look at the final stat line and say, well, Justin Fields still threw 23 times, which is probably about what you want within this game plan, and the Steelers won. And they'll say that goes to what people have been saying all offseason. If this offense doesn't really need a top flight number 2 receiver, what say you about the state of this group after 1 week?
Well, I mean, you just said it all. Van Jefferson had 1 catch, I think, and Calvin Austin had 1. And, it didn't feel like they were really in a place where they did a lot of different things to change the game. In fact, I don't even really remember. Well, I shouldn't say that. I remember Van Jefferson's catch because it should have been a first down and he didn't get there. And they ended up having to kick a field goal, I think. Or they went for it and didn't get it. So on 4th. So I think that's really what it is. That's what it comes down to in so many ways. They have to get more production from those guys. They have to be better. They have to be a bigger part of what's happening. And I just don't think they are or have been. So that's really where it comes down to. They have to either find another guy or figure out different ways to get those guys open. But you're not going to survive with one receiver being the guy that everyone else has to worry about.
Well, isn't that especially true if you're running a conservative game plan too, Paul? Because if you're going to be relying on short passes into tight windows, that takes a certain level of skill that maybe a route runner can get free one or two times a game on a deep ball. But if you're going to try to play this possession type game, don't you need guys who can get open in tight spaces and make tough catches?
Yes. That's the point. But you and I, how long have you and I been talking about this? Right?
2 years.
Going into the preseason when they brought these guys in, we kind of thought, boy, this guy or that guy. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to go about it. But I think that's the most important thing for me is that, it's just one of those things where you look at it from that standpoint, and I feel like I don't know what the options are. I don't think there are many options. That's the big thing.
How much do you think that they were relying on Brandon Aiyuk? Because I think this story kind of has flown under the radar on the YouTube channel this week just because of everything else that we've needed to talk about, especially with the quarterbacks. But the reporting is that Brandon Aiyuk was more or less a Steeler, and that he basically took the deal that the 49ers had on the table for some time, and that it sounds to me like he'd been playing a big game of chicken with the 49ers and never actually wanted to come to Pittsburgh. How much do you think the Steelers' plan was relying on him ultimately choosing to come here at the end of that long process?
Yeah, I mean, sure seems that way, doesn't it, Adam? It seems like they put a lot of eggs in that basket, and unfortunately, that basket fell through for them, and that's a problem. It's a big problem. That's you needed to have a plan B and even a plan C, and they didn't. And so they can spin it any way they want. And, there was the spin that came out. Oh well, that's just not how it is.
How closely are you watching? And I guess I'll start with Denver because they're the team that's in front of the Steelers this week. But Courtland Sutton is a name that has come up a couple of times. I mean, he's no world beater, but he puts up about 700 yards a year, and I think he's a type of guy that would help this offense a lot. There's been conversation now about Davante Adams. If things keep going downhill with the Raiders, is he going to want out of there? And could Pittsburgh be a landing spot? How closely are you watching those teams, and how important is it for the Steelers with the opportunity in front of them to beat Denver to possibly put them in the trade market? Given that, they look pretty bad. Bo Nix looked pretty bad this week. They look like they're going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL. But if you lose to them, then they might think they have a pulse and then they don't need to start trading players.
Well, that's the problem. I mean, Denver, again, you're staking your plan as, okay, we hope something else happens here, right? That's not a good way to do it. It just isn't. And so, okay, so what, you have to root for Denver to lose, beat them, and then root for them to lose it in a few weeks, hopefully that they're ready to trade some guys away? I mean, Adam, does that sound like a plan? It sounds like to me, again, when they traded away Deontay Johnson, they really had no plan for what was going on at receiver.
And I think, again, with Davante Adams, again, you're talking about a lot of money. It would not be an insignificant move. There'd be a lot of pressure on that to work. I think there'd be more pressure on that to work than with Brandon Aiyuk because he's an older guy, right? Paul, how many more great years does Davante Adams have left in him? I think you could have given Brandon Aiyuk a long-term deal and felt reasonably good that you're going to get a productive receiver for 3, 4, 5 years. I don't know if you feel that way about Davante Adams. So I think, what we're seeing is that, yes, there are still options out there, but they're less good than the one that they had invested so much in.
Well, absolutely. I mean, there's no question about it. I mean, to me, again, we've been over this many, many times. It feels like they just didn't have a good plan, period. And when you don't have a good plan, this is what happens. And if you're going to trade someone like Deontay Johnson, you better have a plan. Because now we're talking about all these other things that just don't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Well, and they just had so many months. I don't think that the sin was necessarily trading Deontay Johnson. And they had opportunities to draft guys, Paul, higher than Roman Wilson, who's now, I think the problem is Roman Wilson was a guy that you hoped could maybe step up and be, a number 2 or a number 3 by the end of this season. But with where you drafted him, his spread of outcomes was just going to be naturally lower than if you went after a guy, in one of the earlier rounds of the draft. So that's kind of the issue that they're facing. I did want to get into the quarterbacks with you a little bit, Paul. We talked about it on the live stream on Sunday. You seemed to be warming up to the idea of Justin Fields with a few days to think about it. What are your feelings on whether he should be the guy, whether or not Russell Wilson is healthy until he proves otherwise?
I think, like I said, I wrote about it. I think here's what I liked about Justin Fields. His ability to make plays with his legs, his ability to extend some plays, his ability to sort of be another option, a power running option for them to help their run game and all that other stuff. Those are things that I think are valuable to the way the Steelers want to play football. I think it's complementary to Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren in the running game. I think it's complementary to continue to build the offensive line and get them better. I think there's a lot that you can really like about it. And so I don't have a problem with it. I don't, because I think Russell Wilson, I question how much the guy really wants to play to begin with. But I don't know that what he does is necessarily going to be the best for the Steelers as they build their offensive line and they try and figure out their offensive identity.
Well, I think you introduced the next topic well, Paul, in terms of there's a lot of offensive line talk this week. Are they finally going to go with, the 2 tackles that they've spent, first round picks on the last couple of years, Broderick Jones on one side, Troy Fautanu on the other? Are they going to do that? Are they going to stick with Dan Moore, who Chris Carter pointed out on the North Shore Drive on Wednesday, had the third best pass blocking grade in the NFL among tackles in week 1. He's just I think he's just like a solid, not great player that just keeps finding ways to stick around. How much longer do you think we're going to keep having this conversation about him? Not being a swing tackle, but being really in the mix with Broderick Jones and Troy Fautanu.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that when it all comes down, I think we're going to see Broderick Jones on the left and Fautanu on the right. I mean, I think that's what we're going to see. So I think the big thing with Fautanu is how healthy is he? And if he's healthy, is he getting enough reps and all that other stuff? Those are the things that I think are important for him to get him up to speed. But if Dan Moore, plays well, I'm not sure why you need to rush, Troy Fautanu into the lineup. That's the big thing to me. It's, how well is Dan Moore playing? And if he's playing well enough to continue to play, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, and I think it's good to have some veteran savvy on that line if he is playing well too, because you got so many other young guys around him. At this point, Dan Moore is a veteran, and I think that's something that this group lacks. And in terms of composure, I think that it helps to have that out there. But you also have to make a nod to the future as well. And these guys are the future for the Steelers, where I don't think Dan Moore necessarily is. We're going to get into some Backyard Brawl talk now. Before we do, just want to thank another sponsor. It's Goldberg, Persky & White. If you were diagnosed with mesothelioma or lung cancer, call your local attorneys at Goldberg, Persky & White. For over 40 years, their firm has represented thousands of lung cancer and mesothelioma victims. Call 1-800-COMPLEX or visit gpwlaw.com for a free consultation. All right, Paul, Brawl talk. WVU, last I looked, is favored by 3. Do you look at the first half Pitt played against Cincinnati on Saturday and say that they're still a good distance from being at the caliber of West Virginia, considering that Cincinnati is not supposed to be very good, and Pitt needed every second of that game to beat them? Or do you look at that second half and think, how many times through the years have these college teams we cover, they have that moment where it just clicks, sometime in September and things kind of take off? Do you look at that second half comeback for the Panthers and say, this is a team that's on its way up? How far up they can go is debatable, but they're going to be in this game on Saturday.
I think they found something in the second half with their offense. You had a new offense, brand new offensive coordinator, brand new offensive philosophy, brand new quarterback making a second start on the road. It makes sense. But now the big part of it is, to me, when you look at it from that standpoint, the big part of it is just to try and figure out, is the first half closer to the truth or the second half? And I feel like the second half probably is closer to the truth than the first half, because once they've figured some things out, and Cincinnati plays one of those 3-3-5 weird, defenses that you don't see all the time. So it took them a little bit of time to diagnose it and kind of figure out how to beat it. The thing I'll say about West Virginia, and this is why I like Pitt to win this game. They played Albany this week, and they gave up a lot of passing yards in that game. They had a hard time stopping Albany. And, I kind of feel like if you're struggling to stop Albany, you know what I'm saying, then I think you're in a pretty good place, because you're going to have a hard time stopping. You're going to have a bad place, because you're going to have a hard time stopping a guy like Eli Holstein.
Yeah, I think, did we not see that with Penn State and West Virginia, and Penn State's ability to kind of move the ball once that game settled in a little bit? You had the deep pass to Amari Evans. You had Trey Wallace kind of going crazy for the Nittany Lions. So I think, if you're Pitt, you have to look at that first game too, Paul, don't you? And say, we can do some things with this defense because Penn State made it look pretty easy.
Yeah. Again, I think that to me, I think when you look at West Virginia, that's their problem. They've got a good quarterback, Eric Green. He's good. Their offense is good. They can score, but I don't know that their defense is great. This could be a really high-scoring game, and maybe that's what it's going to be, and it's going to be just both offenses kind of getting after it. But in the end, if you're struggling to stop Albany, And seeing what Penn State did against West Virginia, I kind of feel like Pitt is in a pretty good position here.
The over-under is 59, Paul. Does that sound right to you? Because remember last year, the game, I mean, that game 2 years ago at Acrisure was high scoring. Then last year it's 17-6, a real rock fight. But now the over-under is at 59. What do you think of that?
That's a high number. That's both teams almost getting into the 30s. But that tells you that the Sharps understand, and that's what they're looking at. I mean, they understand the situation. And so that's where, you look at it from that standpoint, and they understand the situation, that one defense is bad, and that because of the way that Pitt plays, there's going to be a lot of possessions. And Garrett Green is really good. And that's his name. I think that's his name, right? The quarterback from West Virginia. He's really good. So, I mean, that's a number that's probably really close at him. Like in my head, I could see 31-28 type games. So, yeah.
Pitt fans were screaming, though, in that first half, Paul, for another quarterback change. Get Eli Holstein out of there. Get Nate Yarnell in. Do we need to start preaching patience as a virtue for Pitt, considering the way things have gone the last couple of years, where you're just kind of, pretty much since Kenny Pickett left, it's just one transfer after the other. And here you have a younger guy that's got a chance to develop. And you made the choice to go to him rather than go into the veteran Nate Yarnell. The Pitt fans need to calm down a little bit and see that this guy is an investment in the future, and that even if it doesn't look great every second right now at the beginning of this season, that those benefits are going to start paying off in time.
Maybe, maybe. I mean, I think that, what was the original question?
You got to be patient with Eli Holstein, don't you?
Oh, yeah. I thought you had referenced something else. You obviously do. He's a redshirt freshman. made his second start. It took Kenny Pickett 4 years to become really good. I don't anticipate that with him, because I think he's in a better offense suited for quarterbacks and stuff. But yeah, I think he's good.
Yeah, I don't understand. I mean, I somewhat get it, given the way Phil Dracovic looked last year and the way Keaton Slovis looked at times. But I just think those are manifestly different situations, in that in Eli Holstein, you're looking at a guy to try to move away from that kind of mercenary plug and play type of situation that's not worked for you. And if you look around the country, it's not working in a lot of other places either. So I think there's got to be a little more patience than I think we've seen so far, because I think it can pay off for the Panthers. Paul, get your thoughts on Penn State. Ugly win against Bowling Green. Not so much in the offensive sense. Penn State looked good moving the ball. I never really had a doubt that they could do it. Maybe you would have liked to see them score another 10 points to make the game, put the game out of reach before Bowling Green could really make a push. But all in all, I think Penn State's offense looked fine, looked good. It was the defense that, to me, Paul, just did not look physical enough against a MAC team. I mean, just missed tackle after missed tackle after missed tackle. It wasn't a matter of like brilliant scheming or other than that first quarter, unbelievable quarterback play. They were just getting whipped in the trenches, it felt like.
Well, I think one of the biggest things about it is James Franklin is a master of winning games he's supposed to win. And I think sometimes they play down to who they play against. You know what I mean? And so I think that's the thing when you look at it from that standpoint. I think it's important to note that they basically, I don't read that much into when they play these games. I don't know what the motivation level is. I don't know, and there's times when, they look bad against the MAC team because, the next week they're playing against somebody better. And the next thing you know, they look like world beaters. To me, I feel like early in the season, everybody's trying to find their footing and trying to find their way. I look at the names that they have on defense, and I have no doubt they're going to be a really good defense when they figure it out and sort of put it all together. So, they survived it. That's really the key. James Franklin said it himself. Didn't he say there's a whole lot of teams around the country that would have loved to survive an ugly game? I think that's what that's what he meant.
Yeah, we saw it with Notre Dame, top of mind. So, I get it. I don't want to overreact to it, but they did just look just not physical enough against the team that they should dominate. And I think, the thing for me too is that in these games under Manny Diaz, like, they could have a bad game and they'd give up 17 points, Paul, not 27, and you're down in the fourth quarter type of stuff. So I think there's somewhere between not having too much alarm and saying that this is not what Penn State had put on tape the last couple of years with Brent Pry and Manny Diaz as defensive coordinators. It's just not a good first impression for Tom Allen. I also want to get into some Pirates here before we wrap up the show. Ben Cherington, right before we started recording here on Wednesday afternoon, said that he expects manager Derek Shelton back next year. Got out ahead of all the speculation that you and I and everyone else in Pirates orbit has been dealing with probably for the last month since the slide really started in earnest. Is that really Ben Cherington's call to make? And do we need to hear from Bob Nutting here late in the season, considering the way that they have underachieved and disappointed?
I mean, I don't understand how Ben Cherington makes that statement if he doesn't know it's to be true. That's the big thing. That's why when I put out a statement today about it, I just said, hey, it's important to note that Bob Nutting owes, you know what I mean? And Bob Nutting owes some things, and because Ben Cherington could just be talking, I doubt that he's going to make that statement. I guess what I'm saying is I doubt that he's going to make that statement unless he knows for the fact that it's going to be good. Now, part of it could be at the end of the year, Bob Nutting fires him, and then it's a moot point. But just got to, move forward with the whole thing and see how it plays out. Adam, I look at 2011 and 2012, and that's the only thing I can come back to. They had two really bad late season collapses. And then in 2013, they stuck with Clint Hurdle. 2013, obviously things came together. I mean, if they're looking for that again, I could see that happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah, except, again, we've talked about it in the show. I just don't see enough help coming from the minor leagues, and I don't see enough development of the guys who are already here to really believe in that. I look at it more like, you remember the Ian Snell, Paul Maholm, Zach Duke, Tom Gorzelani wrote that they were going to solve all the Pirates' problems, right? They all had ERAs like in the threes that one year. What was it, 05? And then just the lack of depth in the minor leagues blew things up. Isn't it possible that because a lot of people do make that comparison, Paul, 2011, 2012, because it worked. But can't you also make a comparison to 05, 06, 07 and say that, other than a few pieces, it's possible this is just not going to work?
Yeah. I mean, it's possible that this could be a disaster. It's possible we could be sitting here next September in the same exact place. But by the same token, it's also not necessarily, a thing of where we say it's definite, right? So you got to figure that out and figure out how it all works together from that standpoint. There's nothing. Here's the thing. You can't predict the future. You can't predict what's going to happen. We'll know, though, in March if this team is serious about winning. Because by then, they better have made some important moves to change a whole lot of things that are going on. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
Because if they don't, then they're not serious about winning.
Yeah, it's just, I think my big thing on the continuum too is just because, and I think this is a fear that a lot of Pirates fans have, because Pirates history tells you that this is what happens, that if you fire the manager and the general manager, that some period of retooling and rebuilding will follow. Is that another 5 years? Who knows? I just think that is a bad reason to bring these guys back. And I think that, it's possible to take a new general manager and a new manager with the same group of players and move forward. And maybe there's going to be some guys that get churned out because they don't fit what that new group wants to do. But the idea that they're going to have to rip it to the studs and lose 100 games 3 years in a row again, I think that should be a standard that Pirates fans hold Bob Nutting to. No, this is not – the fan base is not going to support this. Try to compete with what you've got. And if it's mediocrity, it's mediocrity. But, tearing it down again is not a good reason. The fear of tearing it down again is not a good reason to keep these guys, in my opinion.
Right. No, I mean, I agree. But I don't know that that's why they're doing it. I think it's more that Bob Nutting probably, believe it or not, he probably believes that, hey, that we're close. We're not that far away. A couple more moves these guys are going to make, and, I'm going to authorize them to spend a little bit of money or whatever. You know what I'm saying? The internal discussions in the offseason are going to be incredible to me.
Yeah. And, well, the thing I wonder about, too, with Ben Cherington saying this stuff is the last time this happened, it was not a clean move. It was Clint Hurdle got fired on the second to last day of the season. And then Neil Huntington had an interregnum there before he got canned, and so the idea that everything's going to be resolved at once may not be possible either. And Bob Nutting may do what he did to Huntington and have a decision later on than many of us expect. Don't you think that could be on the table too?
Yeah. I mean, I always go back to this, though. I can't believe that Ben Cherington would say this stuff if it's not true. Do you know what I mean? Can you come up with a scenario where he would say that if it's not true?
I think my scenario would be that he is not on the same page with Bob Nutting, and that he's saying for his own sake that, like, I'm putting I'm planting my flag in the ground, saying this is my guy, and daring Bob Nutting to make me look like an idiot. I think that's probably the one scenario that I can come up with.
Yeah, if he did, then that's stupid, because that's how you get fired.
Yeah, well, we'll see. We've seen dumber things happen with these Pittsburgh Pirates. Paul, any final thoughts on the week? Any pick for the Steeler game in Denver? I think it's going to be, you know me. We've gone through this conversation many times. I think Bo Nix is one of the most proven losers to come out of college, like, ever. Has lost every big game he's ever played. I'll believe he's going to beat this Steelers defense the way it was playing Sunday when I see it.
Yeah, exactly. I think the Steelers are going to win another very similar game, Adam. 16-13 type ugly game, right? I think that's what they're going to do early in the season, and then we'll see what happens from there. Do
you have a pick for the Backyard Brawl?
Yeah, I said 31-28 Pitt.
31-28 Pitt. There you go, folks. Take it to the bank. Thank you, Paul, for joining me this week. Everyone, we'll be back on Sunday after Steelers Broncos, breaking down everything that happens in that game. Should be about 7:30. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Make sure you like this video if you enjoyed it. Help us out in the YouTube algorithm. And stay tuned the rest of the week. We got a lot more North Shore Drive with Christopher Carter on Friday. We're going to have plenty of Backyard Brawl coverage. So hit that subscribe button, put the notifications on, and we will talk to you all again next week. Thanks, Paul.
All right. Thank you. We'll see you.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.